Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Portuguese American Art Gallery Meet the Artist session on behalf of the Embassy of Portugal in Washington, D.C., Palcas, the Chamber of Commerce, and FLAD. My name is Sandra Pires, and I am the Cultural Attaché at the Embassy of Portugal in Washington, D.C. This session is going to be streamed on Facebook as well as on Zoom. We also have here with us the artist Isabel Pavão, who will co-host this session with me. Isabel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. I'm Isabel Pavão. I'm an artist born in Portugal. I live in New York since 1990. I've been painting and being inspired here. I have a PhD from New York University, and I've been teaching and so on. And it's my great pleasure to be with you and Michael. Thank you for having us joining you in your studio.
Thank
Sandra?
you. So we are gathered here today to meet the artist Michael de Brito. He received his degree from Parsons School of Design and did postgraduate work at New York Academy of Art. De Brito has had multiple solo exhibitions with the Eleanor Ettinger Gallery in New York, Galeria Graça Brandão in Lisbon, Portugal, and the University of Maine, Museum of Art in Bangor, Maine. His work has been exhibited many places, namely at the National Portrait Gallery in London and also in Museu Afro, Brazil. Michael, would you like to introduce a little bit yourself too?
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael de Brito. First, I want to say thank you to Palcas, and I want to say thank you to the Embassy in Portugal and to Isabel for co-hosting this session. Well, should we talk about background? Is that what should I talk about?
Sure.
growing up. I was born in the United States to Portuguese parents. Both of my parents are from the south of Portugal, from Algarve. My parents, my mother grew up in Australia. My father grew up in the United States, mainly around when he was like 14, 15 years old. So, in terms of Portuguese parents, they're very kind of progressive in that way. And then, growing up, I just felt, I always enjoyed painting and drawing. And my first love was always, I guess, comic books. And that kind of led me into going to school for art, studying at Parsons, and then going to the New York Academy of Art, and just continuing on doing painting. I guess that's kind of my background, and then I started showing with galleries, and from there,
So should we ask you, can we ask you a little question before you start? So we are in Michael's studio, Michael will show us a little bit of his artwork and his studio as well, which is a pleasure to be here in your studio. And so when we met virtually, when we were starting to prepare this session, you said that you started drawing when you were around 7 years old at a hardware store.
Yeah.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about this beautiful story? And
Well, it was, growing up, I always used to spend a lot of time after school getting dropped off at my father's hardware store in Newark. And, I just, at some point in time, I just felt that, I was bored. I didn't want anything to do with the hardware store at that time anyway. But, and I remember there was a guy that used to work at the hardware store. His name was Tony, and very good drawer. At the time I was like 7 years old. So it was every time I would come in, I would see him drawing, and I continually asked him to just draw me things. I would say, please draw me a bike or draw me a plane. And, this kept going on for weeks and for months, and then, Tony then after a while just kept saying, listen, I'll show you how to draw, and then you draw on your own, and this way. From there, it didn't even dawn on me that I can actually do those things on my own. And once he kind of opened that door for me, it became, a lot easier for me to then see that that's kind of the path that I wanted to go down. So, yeah, so.
That's
It's very interesting that you start your drawing by asking somebody to draw for you, and then you find out that you have it in yourself. That's kind of, was that a click moment for?
Yeah, I guess it was always there. You think like, oh, there's this, anytime I saw someone drawing, but especially in that moment, I saw him drawing, and there was something so amazing about it, right? That he was able to create something out of nothing, right? And when I saw that there was a possibility to do that, and then he said to me, he's like, just do it on your own. And I was like, oh my God, I never even thought about that. But, that's from there, it just became something that, it pushed me to want to do it on my own.
Michael, would you like to show us a little bit around and maybe tell us a little bit about this painting that you have right behind you?
Well, what we could do is so with this one, this one was finished. Let me back up just a little bit, and then let me just switch my camera, and then you guys can see a little bit better. So with this piece, give me 1 second. I'm just going to do a little bit of adjusting. Okay. See if you could see it well. So with this piece, I finished last year. This is a 2020 painting, and this is I worked on it during quarantine, right? So quarantine actually for me ended up working out because it gave me sufficient time to just spend working on this and just kind of get it done. So the paintings of neighbors and family members that were in the backyard, and most of my paintings usually take place inside. And so with this one, it was kind of just maybe taking it outside and seeing what that felt like. It's probably like during nighttime, around maybe like 6, 7 o'clock. But yeah, the idea is to try to keep the feeling of what I usually do, but just take it outside. What I liked with this one was really trying to capture the kind of interaction with the figure that's in the painting, and then with the viewer. So most of my paintings, when you really look at them, majority of the time, what I've been playing with lately is really trying to get the viewer and the figures in the painting to engage, right? So meaning where you walk up and you look at the work and you look at the figures, and then you're kind of questioning like what they're thinking because they're looking directly at you. And this is something that's been done, in classic paintings. You look at someone like Manet's painting of the woman at the bar, or like Velasco's paintings. It's really this kind of sense of having the viewer engage and then become one with the painting, right? And I think for me, that's always what I've always found successful about looking at master paintings.
Yeah. You think you tell a story somehow? You have this feeling that your paintings are telling a story, or just a moment in time?
Well, what I like to do is I like to keep the story to be somewhat open-ended in a way where the figures tell their story, but they're not giving it all away, right? And then again, this also goes back to this idea of, when you look at these these historic paintings, these classic paintings, the same thing, right? You look at the woman in a bar by Manet, and the story is, there's really not, that there's a bar there, and you're questioning who she is, but it opens up the doors to kind of let you kind of come up with your own, right? Your own story, right? And I think there's beauty in that. And that's kind of what I like doing with my work, right? Is giving it to you, but not kind of finishing the story, right? So.
And you succeed doing that.
What's that?
It works.
Oh, thank you.
You succeed doing it because it's really fascinating. You start looking and you want to know what's going on, and there's some mystery to it.
Yeah, and you can see, I guess, from the earlier work where it was this kind of journey of trying to figure out all this stuff. I think there was a real big kind of switch maybe like 4 or 5 years ago where I kept looking at my older work and trying to figure out what was successful, at least in my eyes, and then what wasn't, right? And I basically put everything, separated what I thought worked and what didn't work, right? And then I did the same thing with why my paintings, some of the paintings that I thought weren't successful, and then I would look at master paintings and I would hang them all up and try to figure out, what was going on with these paintings, right? Why were they super successful? Why do people still consider them, relevant in our time, right? And so these are the things that I started to kind of take notes and break down.
Yeah.
And then what I started to realize is that, there were certain things that were consistently happening in each of those artist paintings. Whether you looked at Manet, you looked at Rembrandt, you looked at Velasquez, Frans Hals, it didn't make a difference. They were all kind of using a similar kind of language in the work, right? And so the goal was to just try to understand that and then implement that in my work as best as I possibly could.
Michael, can I ask you a brief question, since you are mentioning so many artists? Which artists inspired you to do your type of art?
It's changed over time, but the one that's always been current is always John Singer Sargent, is someone that has always been in my, in all my work, and trying to think about like how to, technique wise, especially. That came from when I was in college. I had a painting teacher, and I remember him. This is at the moment where I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do as a career. And I was on this verge of becoming a comic book artist. And my painting teacher said, look, go to the museum, look at this artist, and if it doesn't change your mind, then you keep going the path that you want to go down. And he's like, go look at this painter, John Singer Sargent. And at the time, I'm like, I don't know, 18, 19, and I'm like, I go to the museum, and I'm thinking like, what is this? Some probably Civil War general or something like that, right? And I walk in, and I'm asking around, and I see this painting of Madame X, and from that point on, I was like, that's it. That's all I want to do. I just want to paint. I want to make paintings that look like this. And so then once I found him, then I started looking to see what inspired him. And then I looked up Velasquez, and then Frans Hals, and Anders Zorn. And the list goes on, Manet. And, there's certain artists that come up more often, than others. But for the most part, it's always either been, Die Hard, it's John Singer Sargent, then Diego Velasquez. Frans Hals makes his way in there. But yeah, and then you have Manet every so often. But
that's interesting.
The breaking point, going to Metropolitan Museum, right?
Yeah, and at that time, I was going like at least once every 2 weeks, and so as a student, the best was one of my painting teacher was like, at the time he was like, you don't have to pay full price. You're a student, just give him whatever you have. And I was like, you mean I could just give him $1? And they're like, yeah, just give him $1, and so, I was a student, so I gave $1, and you have, everything from Egyptian wing to paintings, European, American wing. It's like contemporary, classic.
I did the same as a student. I remember in the beginning, 25 cents. Later on, I was teaching at the museum my students, and I used to tell them the same thing you are telling me.
Yeah.
I used to give them $1. You don't have to pay. You are a student.
It's true. Now it's different because now they ask to pay the $20. But I think the one thing that I learned from that was the fact that like my professors, as amazing as they were, because I learned so much from all of them, especially at Parsons. But I thought what I found most interesting was that a lot of them were saying, look, we'll show you what we know, but if you're really going to learn how to paint, you need to go to the museum. My painting professor, sophomore year, said, look, get as close as you can. If you can, scratch the painting, see what's under the surface, get as close, not literally, but, he would just say, put your face to the painting, and that's how you're going to understand how to paint, right? And I think listening to that's where I felt like I learned so much. So. All right, so I could walk, maybe take you this way.
Go ahead.
Sure. All right. I just wanted to remind our audience that you can ask the questions in the Q&A and the chat box, and also if you want to ask your questions on Facebook, you can also ask your questions, and they will be addressed by Michael. So I will ask them to Michael. So please.
Okay. All right. So this painting I did, and this was probably like my earliest painting. I did it junior year of college at Parsons, and I forget the assignment that we had, but either way, this painting has been with me since that time period. I could never sell it. mostly because when I did the painting, a month later, my grandfather had passed away. And so there was like a huge sentimental, value to the painting to me. So, people have asked me and they've offered me to buy it and things like that, but something about it, I can never give it away. Right. So, I've kind of gotten past all that with certain paintings, but with this one, I just couldn't do it, and I think there was a lot more to it as well. It kind of opened a lot of doors for me. It also, it gave me an understanding of, at that point, that I truly felt like I was actually getting somewhere as being an artist. Right. Because before this, it was me like painting and trying different subject matter and trying different assignments and things like that. And nothing seemed to be sticking. And then, it's me thinking about like, how am I going to really find something that identifies with me and symbolizes who I am. Right. And painting this, it seemed to change everything for me. I remember at this time I was living in a studio in Newark, and I was going to my grandparents' house frequently to eat lunch, and I was painting all this other stuff. And it was funny because I guess it was there right in front of me all along, and I just didn't even I didn't realize it. And so when I walked downstairs to my grandparents' basement, they had their kitchen table there, and I saw them eating, and I looked at it and I was like, this is a painting. I was like, this is a painting. And I was like, this is it. And so once that clicked, I was like, I'm going to do this right now. So I did drawings, and then I took some photographs, and I went back to my studio, and I was like, all right. And I started trying to map out this composition. And then this is kind of what I ended up with. So you can see the kind of early elements of kind of the things that I've been working on now, but it all kind of started with this.
Michael,
it's beautiful.
We already have 2 questions for you.
Okay.
From our audience. So the first question is: are most of your works at this scale and size?
Well, this is I think about like 40 inches, like 28 by 40. It just varies. Lately I've been doing a lot bigger paintings, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I stick to one size. Even when I have a show, I like variety, only because, when you go to the museum, it's not like just one, it's not one size, right? You have big paintings, you have small paintings, right? Mm-hmm. So, like the one we were just looking at, that painting is about 9 feet. So it's about 7 feet by 9 feet. So you can see there's a very difference in size. I mean, if you look, I'll show you, you can see mm-hmm. that painting versus this painting, very different scale. So. Then
we have another question. And so Joseph Campesi asks, I notice family and food as a theme in your work. What is about these 2 elements that inspires you?
I mean, there's something very Portuguese, especially about the food, right? So for my family, that's, we'll be eating breakfast and then we'll talk about lunch. We'll be eating lunch and we're talking about dinner, right? And so it's something that always comes up. And I also find that there's this beautiful thing of where, people get to unite around the table and they talk about their, what's going on. And I've always had this sense of like, the importance of family, right? So that's kind of why I just keep kind of working within this subject matter. But yeah.
So these were 2 questions that we have.
Okay.
Can I ask one question? I'd like to ask you, first you start by drawing always, or photography? What is how?
Usually I'll sit and I'll draw I'll sketch, right? So give me 1 second and I'll show you. I have my sketchbook here, so you can see kind of, and this is a habit and a discipline that I gained when I was in college, because when I was at Parsons, they were very kind of, they really wanted you to carry this around. It's like a diary, right? And so wherever I go, I take this with me. I have this one and I have a little one. So even if I'm sitting somewhere at an event and I'm sitting at a table by myself, like I don't mind, so, but yeah, usually it starts out with drawings like this, right? So I'll do sketches while I'm sitting at the table or from life, and then try to see what's working and what's not, but yeah, I basically end up just kind of filling up books like this. And when something clicks, then what I end up doing is taking some reference shots, trying to capture as much as I can within that moment, and then taking a bunch of just variety of reference shots. Because ultimately the end product is what's important, right? So, I mean, if someone could sit there for me for 8 hours, a day, then that would probably, I could do it, but it just seems we have all these other elements and technology. It's why not try to take advantage of it, right?
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, it works.
Yeah. So, but again, you mentioned too, in terms of the process, a lot of this is like the early work, I would do it with a brush. So with this painting, I would map out most of the drawing. You can see a little bit of the brown kind of showing through. So I would do the whole thing in a brown, I would do a brown wash, and then draw with the round brush and then sketch everything out. I find now that it's a lot easier that I just work on straight white canvas and then just work with Vine charcoal.
Okay.
The reason
you use oil? Is it oil?
Yeah. It's all oil on canvas. Yeah. And so I use it's a cotton duck canvas. I used to purchase it at New York Central. It was such a great place. You probably remember New York Central.
Yes, absolutely.
And New York Central was on 3rd, and it was just such an amazing place. And they had binders of all this different canvas. And I remember going there when I was like 20, 21 years old, and I was like, I want some decent canvas. And he would go through and tell me like, this is what I think is good. And then you go to the warehouse and they have a roll waiting for you. So, but and this is technically, I've been using the same canvas for what's going on like 2000. So, it's gone over 20 years, so, yeah. But, all right. What we could do is then I'll walk you to the next piece and we'll take a look, keep taking a look. And if you want me to adjust anything or camera wise, so I'll adjust if it's too dark.
No, it's good.
Fine.
In terms of like technique, like we were just talking about earlier, I start with sketches in the sketchbook, but you can then see over here where I'm working with preliminary drawings. So I start with this because I really want to read out all of my issues in terms of proportions and anatomy, things like that. Because I'd rather do it there than spend all my time trying to figure that here. Yeah. So, and a lot of times if my drawing is not successful and I'm having major issues just in the drawing stage, I rarely will even start a painting with it. So, and this is what I always tell my students too. It's like, if you're drawing it and you're having issues with the drawing, you're not going to make it better with the painting, right? So, the goal is to try to figure out what's wrong with the drawing and then start tackling the painting. And that's how I've always kind of figured that out. So, so with this painting, again, you can see the difference in scale. So that's about 2002 around there. This is 2013. And, the reason is that I'm starting to feel more comfortable and more with my technique and my skill, where then I'm able to then go larger. When, in that painting over there, I felt that, it's earlier. I wasn't prepped yet to do larger paintings. So, but I felt like this was a good time to do the right subject matter, and this is a painting of my grandmother making chouriços, and she's making this in the United States, right? So it definitely feels very Portuguese, but this is definitely in the United States in the backyard. She has like a little smoker that my grandfather made, and they smoked this right in Newark in the backyard. And what I liked about it was this sense of old world kind of look to it, but, still in modern times. And I liked everything, in terms of the color and the patterns and all those things like that too. And the idea of the sausages where, a lot of times, especially in American culture, this stuff seems kind of very foreign, right? And so I like, people seeing it and they ask the question of like, what's going on? So, but yeah. But a lot of it goes back to like what we were talking about, the last time was, these moments, right, that I feel that I don't want to lose, right, and they're important to me, and so it's kind of this kind of Rolodex of memories, right, and so you can do it with the camera, or you can do it writing music, and I just happen to just like to do it in paint, so. But yeah.
Michael, we have a question from Jim Langley.
Okay.
He asks, could you talk about your drawings? Sometimes your drawings seem preparatory, but they have a wonderful life that seems abstract, with shapes that aren't figurative, but take on significance. Is this abstraction part of your thinking?
It is. And I think, I really think there's this balance between abstraction and realism where they, it might not make sense, but thinking abstractly sometimes help you make more realistic work, right? Where if you're looking at a hand, and I always tell my students this as well, where I'm like, don't look at the hand and the shapes as bones and skin. Look at it more abstractly, right? What are the shapes around the hand? What's the negative space around it, right? What's going on between the fingers? What are the values, the shapes making inside the hand? And I think sometimes you're able to really, capture the look or the essence of it better that way. So, yeah, I think that it's definitely part of it, right? So, you can even see the way that if you look up close here, I'll bring you up close. You can see that the work, close up is not. Give me 1 second. Sorry. Okay, here we go. You can see that a lot of this is just more abstract, right? It's not. I'm not sitting there trying to render it. It's just putting out marks and then backing up. Right, where from a distance it looks like one thing, but up close you can see that it really, it's laying down paint and making these marks. I think sometimes, if you just take like a little section, you can almost make like an abstract painting just out of it, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
That's why it's so difficult to make this differentiation between abstract and figurative. When people ask us, artists, are you figurative or are you abstract? In fact, if we are putting materials on a canvas, it's very abstract in a way, even though in your case, your language is very evocative of certain reality that you chose and makes your painting so unique, your language as an artist.
Very true.
Yeah.
And I have an artist friend, my friend Jeremy, and we go back and forth on this idea of, good art is about taste, right? It's really about, it has nothing to do with figurative or realism or abstract or any of that. It really comes down to, shapes and your choices as an artist of choosing color and your texture and your supplies, all that stuff comes into play, right? So, you're going to have great abstract painters, great figurative painters, and then you're going to have bad abstract painters and bad figurative painters, right?
Absolutely.
And it's really about the choices you make within the work, right? And that's something that it's good to not get stuck in this idea that, you have to be this way and you got to think this way, right? So.
Yeah.
In fact, we have a question for you here from Jason Veliket, where he asks you, where are you looking to push your work in the future? How are you looking to continuously challenge yourself?
For me, it's just to keep kind of growing in terms of the work, right? Finding subject matter that still kind of relates to this, but it's, new and fresh, right? And then just keep kind of getting the work out there so more people can see it. That's it.
And we have another question from Joyce Yoki that is asking, which is more challenging to paint, food or faces?
I guess I have to just say they're both challenging, but faces for me, I always find that I start with right away. So when I paint something like this, the face is the first thing that I do, because if the face doesn't look good, I don't even want to paint the rest of it. So lately I've been trying to break out of that habit because, what I do is I'll start somewhere else and then lead my way up to it. But but a lot of times I just start with the face, because if I feel that I've captured something in the face, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a likeness. It's just more about like the feeling in it. Then I'm willing to fight for the rest of the painting, right? And let me say that, and this might look like there's only something easy about it, but every single one of these is a fight to the end, So, and it's a lot of it is about the marks, the like that kind of I want to try to make it look like it's effortless, but there is a lot of effort going into it. So.
Makes sense.
All right. I'll walk you to the next piece so we can kind of keep it going. And okay, there you go. I'm going to back it up just a little bit so you can see the painting and the sketches.
Okay.
Is it too light, you think, or should I darken it up a little bit? Let's do
darken it up a little bit.
Yeah, what we'll do is I'll bring it closer so that this way that doesn't get lost.
Okay.
And then we'll talk a little bit about the drawings. There it goes.
Okay.
The camera.
Good.
So, what I end up doing is I really do drawings based on what I feel like is going to challenge, give me issues throughout the painting. And so, like with this painting, it happened to be the face of the figure. And so I spend a lot of time trying to capture that. So sometimes it might be one drawing, just happens to be my partner. So she is around me all the time. So someone like this, I can almost draw without having to look at her. But there are other times where I have to spend 10, 12 times drawing the same head over and over and over. But yeah, like I said, I don't even want to start making a painting unless I feel like I've captured it, like the feeling in the face. And then it's also the same thing with the hands too. I try to paint hands like I paint a face. And this is something that I always bring up too when I'm talking about, painting figures, because everybody's hands are so different from one another, right? It's like their faces. And if we just go into it with this generic idea that, it's their hands mechanically, then you lose I want it to be where you can almost look at the hands without looking at the face, and you can say, that's so-and-so, right? And so that's kind of how I even think about when I paint hands too. So, but yeah, and then I'll back up just a little bit so you can see the painting as well too. Sorry. There you go.
Beautiful. Michael, I have a question.
Sure.
When you are painting your subjects, generally from what I think it's family, people know, mostly. What is their reaction to it? Do they like their likeness? How do you see them? Or do you have reactions?
I mean, with my family, my family, they've gone to the point now. I mean, this is going on 20 years. So to them, it's now it's like I said, we were talking about last time. I basically sit in the corner and I'll do drawings and I'll take photographs, and it doesn't even faze them now. In the beginning it did, they would kind of shy away from it. But they understand now what the end goal is, right? So I think now they just see that they want to be a part of it, and so they join in. And so I always ask them just to kind of pretend like I'm not here. Okay. And then in this instance, with my partner, she doesn't look at the painting as her, right? So she tries to look at the painting subjectively, right? Where it's it's of a painting of a person, right? So she judges it based on that, because if you start thinking does it look like me, or it's not about that, for me anyway.
No, exactly. Yeah.
In fact, Michael, we have here a question that is similar to what Isabel just asked you, but a little different. It says, how does your family feel about being the protagonists of the painting?
I mean, my parents are okay with it. My grandmother sometimes gets upset because she thinks that her kitchen is dirty and her house is dirty. So, but what are you going to do? I really want to capture something that feels authentic. So I don't want to deviate from trying to have everybody clean up, So I think they don't mind being it. They like being a part of the story, So and I find that I like using them as the characters in that story, because I know them, right? They know me, and they're willing to open up and kind of let go around me. So I think it works. So.
Yeah. Works very
I
well.
have one question. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that it works very well.
Yeah, it is beautiful. Michael, I have another question.
Sure.
Regarding this. If you ever people like the way you paint, of course, is very well done, is beautiful, and I want to have my portrait done. Did it ever happen to you that somebody from the outside wants to commission a portrait? How would you?
Sometimes, I mean, well, they do, but I think ultimately I don't know. I try to shy away from being like labeled a portrait painter, and that's why I'd rather, if I was going to paint you, Isabel, I would rather have you come to my studio and me dictate what I want from you rather than you dictate it from me. Because in the end, it'll come out to be more authentic, and it'll be something that it'll be part of both of us, right? It'll be something that it's of you, but at the same time, there's part of me in there, right? And so I think that's what I like about painting people, right?
Yeah, sure.
I always go back to like Alice Neal, right? If you look at Alice Neal's work, Alice Neal would have all these friends or people that she knew sit in her studio in her house, and she would paint them. And they're not necessarily like typical portraits because there's way more of her in them, right? Than there are of the figure, right? So
that's why I think the interest of people to have been portrayed by you because of your own language, the way you see things. That's the beauty of it, right? It's
and I think people, once they ask me that and then they hear my response, then and I tell them what I want from them, then they usually they kind of shy away from that, right? So
so that they did,
they get the idea, but it's like any of my friends too. It's like I'd rather capture them in this moment that I felt was significant, rather than having them say like, "Oh, come to my studio, get dressed up, and whatever," and then it's like I don't know. I find it to not be as authentic as I want it to be. So
Michael, I wanted to ask you a question. I know that you painted the Portuguese judge Rui Manuel Gens de Moura Ramos years ago.
Yeah.
How did you do it? How did you do it, and how did this commission came about?
So that commission came about. I was just about to start showing in Galeria Graça Brandão. They had a 2-person show there, and I guess they were searching for a painter, a Portuguese painter, to paint the judge, and they came across my work and they reached out to me. And this is again going back to what Isabel and I were just talking about, where they were asking me to paint the portrait, and I wrote back to them and I said, I don't mind painting the portrait, but you have to understand that it's going to look like my work. It's not going to be like the portraits that you have already hanging on the wall. A lot of them were, they were sitting on a chair with like a red or black background, and I didn't want to do that. And so luckily, the judge was very like open to it and very kind of accepting of me being that way. So I went to Portugal and I asked them to set up for me, and I did a few drawings in pastel. I did a painting study, and then took some reference photos and came back and made the painting. So but it was a really nice experience. Met a lot of nice people, and I just, it was cool to just kind of do that. I always feel like trying to break out of things that, you're stuck in doing, right? And so again, yes, I don't do portraits, but I don't know. I felt like at that point it was good to just give it a try and see what kind of turned out, Yeah.
Michael, there is a person here asking you if you can adjust your microphone because the sound is not coming through. I can hear you well, but maybe someone cannot.
Okay.
What I'll do is I'll raise the volume.
I think now it's good.
Is it better? I can raise the volume a little.
No. I think it's good.
You think it's better?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
It's good.
Okay. So I just wanted to mention a few quick things too. It's like when you look at this work, it's kind of going back to like the other paintings, and it's capturing these kind of moments where the viewer was able to engage with the subject in the painting. With this one, I really wanted it to be where she's having this moment to herself, and we're kind of interrupting that moment, and she's kind of gazing at us, kind of questioning why we're there, right? But I always like playing with that kind of idea, especially now. Like lately, I've been liking a lot of that. because there's a lot of, like, again, going back, and I really reference a lot of historical paintings in that way. So there's a lot of these interesting historical paintings where, you know, like they're captured in this moment and they're like looking at the viewer, and then you're looking at the painting and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do? I don't know what to do, you know? But I always think if paintings are successful, if you're able to kind of feel something, you know, from it in that moment. So anyway, okay, we'll move on. Let's move on to the next. All right, so this painting was done in 2013. It's of a close family friend, basically a cousin. We call her prima. This painting, again, was, you know, another a big painting, but this was earlier than the one that you saw earlier. And it's a moment where I had seen, I think her, you know, this is around where her husband passed away, and she was sitting by herself, and, you know, she had come over to kind of spend some time with my grandmother. And I just liked the moment. I just felt like there was something beautiful about it. And again, this is what I was talking about, Isabel, earlier, where I try to let the body language and the figure tell the story, right? Where you're looking at it and you're kind of thinking, what is she thinking? What's happening in this scene? And so that's kind of the approach that I always take, right? And so I really believe, like, the face definitely does that, but hands also, the gestures are really important. And then
absolutely. Sorry, I interrupted you, Michael. But I was just looking at this painting, and I see the whole body. It's just not the expression in the face and the hands. We see the whole body. It's psychological, but also physical, and somehow you can express that. Besides the whole atmosphere, that helps too, of course. But it's a whole. You feel the person in there.
Yeah.
And that is magnificent. Yeah.
And that's what, and it's something that I always try to think about, in a sense where sometimes it's not even about a likeness, you know. I mean, I want it to look somewhat like the person, but it's more about trying to capture, like, the feeling of it, right? And the way that person feels, you know, almost like, you know, trying to capture the soul rather than saying, like, oh, because, you know, a lot of times you'll see these paintings that look almost identical to the person, but there's no soul in there. And then there's other paintings that it's like 4 brush marks, and you're like, you can see that that person is just there, right? And so I think that's always the objective in trying to make these paintings.
Yeah,
it's an essence.
Looks like a poetic moment. When you capture that moment, it looks like a poetic moment in a everyday scene. It could be an everyday scene, but it's poetic as well.
Yeah, and you know, going back, you know, speaking of poetry and things like that, and you know, I feel, you know, I always think, like, you know, a good writer a lot of times writes the things that they know, right, and they understand. And so for me, anytime that I deviate from this kind of idea or subject matter, you know, it's sometimes successful, but majority of the time I end up coming back, because I feel like there's just such, like, this story just needs to keep being told, you know, and I try to reinterpret it, so then this way it doesn't become so repetitive and stale. But I like being able to just, you know, take them and it's also they're such good you know, good characters, in the sense that they anything that I ask them to do, they'll do, you know. But so. Yeah, and then, you know, when you look at, if we want to talk about in terms of, you know, like the painting itself, you know, compositionally, you know, going back to a lot of the work, if you notice, there's a lot that I started to really pick apart when it came to technique, right, and the technical aspects of the work. You know, I started thinking about composition, right, where earlier on I thought about it, but I didn't feel it was as important as it is now. And, you know, for all my work tends to have this golden spiral. So if you know, if you're not really familiar with the golden spiral, it's just a way of breaking down the composition. The Greeks came up with this like thought process where it basically it's it's in nature, it's natural. Essentially what it is the way you divide the canvas, you create a 1-to-1 square, and then you end up with a rectangle, and then that rectangle is equal if you had expanded it to the size of the original painting. And you keep doing that until infinity, right? And then what you do then is from that corner, you take a spiral that starts from that corner and works its way through, right? And usually if you can see a lot of my paintings end up in the spiral, usually ends up where the figure's face is, right? Or the important aspect of the composition. So, and that tends to happen a lot in a lot of the work. And then I'll split it up too with doing like, other compositional elements in terms of triangular compositional elements, but I think it's very important, and yeah.
So we have two more questions.
Sure.
From the audience. So from Maria Amelia Ramaciotti, she says that your Prima's face is so expressive, but I'm awed by the amount of details and still lifes. Are those objects important to you?
Oh, definitely. I think, what I find that the objects in some ways are almost as important as the figure, just because they tell a story as well too, right? So if you continually look at all the work that I've done, a lot of the objects keep popping up, right? Whether it's, like the pots and the pans in the background, or like, the bottles, things like that just kind of keep showing up. And I really feel like they're a part of, they need to be there because they help tell the story, right? So yeah, for sure, I find the objects very, very important.
Okay, we have another question that says, when you capture these moments, do you also jot down the feelings you have in that moment to bring into the painting?
Sometimes, not really. I try to capture it more visually than I do like writing it down. Yeah, I don't know. It's, to me, I don't find that it's necessary for me to put it down. Not to say that you can't do that, but I just think that it's my approach. So I just end up sitting there doing drawings and then really trying to take in the moment while I'm in it. So,
Michael, do you want to show us more paintings or more?
Sure.
We have about 10 more minutes.
Okay, so I'll show you something a little bit more. Do you want to see like a finished painting that's kind of done right now, or do you want to see some stuff that's kind of work in progress? What would you prefer?
I'm curious about the work in progress, but I don't know.
Me too.
Okay, all right. So just bear with me. I'm going to bring you on a little journey. We're going to come this way. Okay. So this is a new piece that I'm working on. So it's basically a table setting, but it's the full table where we're kind of removed. So, we have a figure in the foreground, and, now there's going to be other figures up here. So you can see kind of how I work in this sense where I break it up. The reason why I end up doing, I somewhat do a gridding system, especially with these big paintings. Because in the past, what I would do is I would just draw it freehand, and then my drawing somehow would just start growing. Even if I measured it, it still would start growing, and then all of a sudden I realized that my head's all the way up there, and then I don't have any space. But this is also a lot of the reason why I don't stretch my canvas either. So I give myself about 5 to 6 inches on either side. So if my drawing needs to expand, I have that option, right? So I buy rolled canvas, I put it on these boards, and then I draw and paint on the boards, and then when I'm done, then I stretch it from there. So,
wow.
Yeah, and you can see, so I have like some preliminary drawings. So for me, a lot of what was giving me the issues, a lot of these drawings I did in my sketchbook, I felt that they were successful enough to just start drawing on the canvas. But this one, I felt like I needed to do like a preliminary drawing. So, yeah, and sometimes I'll go in and do a lot of detail, you can see there. And other times I don't put I don't put much detail, but it just depends on the day. But a lot of it ends up just getting painted over anyway. So sometimes people see the drawings on the canvas and, they're sad because it's going to get covered, but it is what it is, So, okay. So I will continue walking. Give me one sec. All right, so I'm gonna back you up here. These are 2 more pieces that I'm working on. So just, you can see I have the preliminary drawings again too, right? So, and then this is like another small scene, but I'm just cropping it. So this is just 3 figures and all just done in vine charcoal. And then this one I already started. So you can see where I like this one is a prime example of from sketchbook to preliminary drawing and then to drawing on the canvas, and then I start painting, and I start right with the head and then kind of work my way around it. So what I end up trying to do is paint to a point where I'm able to kind of camouflage it. So I wouldn't stop like midway in the face. I basically do the whole face, do the hair, and then leave this for the next time, because then once I start here, I can kind of camouflage it where then you wouldn't see where I began and ended. So
you have a very the methodology you have is really very strict in a way, no? The steps you go to do a painting, by the sketch, then the choice, the drawing, then make it bigger, decide on the proportion. And then
it's something that I battle with a lot. I try to think like how big it should be or how small it should be. And then the process is just over time, you see what works for you, right? And for me, this is the approach that seems to work best. So it's not to say that I don't break out of it, right? Because there's the idea is that you do it to a point where either you exhaust it, and then if it doesn't keep working the way you want it to, then you got to change it, right? So it's a lot like, so there's a specific white that I would always use, right? I use a white that's called flake white, and it basically has lead carbonate. And for years I've used that color, and then what happens now? They're discontinuing that. So Winsor Newton doesn't make it anymore. And so to break out of that, I slowly kind of wean myself off of using lead white, right? But again, it's like I like trying to change that. It's hard for me anyway. It's really hard to break out of those habits, right? But I like trying to do that.
So I just wanted to remind the audience that you can still ask questions to Michael on the chat box or the Q&A. We only have 7 minutes, so feel free to ask your questions. And we can continue in your studio, Michael.
Sure. Okay, let's go. So, if you want to know, I could tell you a little bit about my studio too. So my studio is it's an old Italianate 1875 row house that I live in with my partner in Jersey City, and the house is beautiful, and so we've been slowly kind of restoring it, but it's definitely a house that really brings a lot of inspiration to me. So that's why I enjoy being in the space a lot. So I'll walk you through. So I would talk about a little bit too about some of the brushes that I use. So this way you can see so the bigger paintings, what I end up doing, my methodology, like Isabel was saying, was trying to figure out what works best. So what I end up doing is the brushes that work for one painting, I switch for a different painting. So if I'm going to do something smaller, like the ones I was just showing you, I probably would use like a smaller brush like this. The bigger paintings, then what I started doing was just going larger, right? So these larger paintings, if you look at the brush strokes, essentially it's almost like a house painting brush. They're these large, really nice, beautiful brushes. And so it just helps with keeping that kind of looseness, right? Like it's almost like a sketch in a way. But yeah, so I end up collecting all of these brushes and kind of have this approach to sizing for each painting. I wanted to show you too something that's kind of interesting. So again, I was speaking about my collection of white paint. So you can see here that I have about 5 years worth of lead carbonate paint, right? So this could probably kill an elephant, right? But you know, the idea is that it's such good paint. I just, the problem is that it's a lot of companies are stopping making this now. So there's still American companies that make it, but Winsor Newton was the one that made this paint. They make it so nice. But
Yeah.
so I have this, and then once it runs out, then that's it, you know. But again, that's why I've been slowly kind of just trying to figure out what works best for me. But yeah, this is my little collection of white paint.
Michael, we have 2 more questions for you from the audience. Well,
Sure.
So Leonor Alvim Brazão asks you, you absolutely capture the Portuguese soul in your paintings. How does the Portuguese market receive your work?
Well, I was speaking with a school from Portugal, a friend of mine, Martinho Costa. He's a painter in Portugal, and he had his students kind of. I was giving a talk to them, and they were saying how my paintings are very Portuguese, and even though I'm not technically, I was born in the United States, and so I think what I end up getting from it too is the fact that sometimes you have to step outside of Portugal to really see Portugal, right? As an artist, sometimes if you live there, a lot of that younger generation wants to do work that doesn't represent Portugal or doesn't look anything that like Portugal. I'm not saying everyone is like that, but I just felt that, I guess I'm somewhat, you know, removed from it. I have my family here, but I appreciate it from a distance, right? And so a lot of those things it's not a continuous thing that's in my life, right? So I think that's my best way of kind of explaining like how I'm able to really capture that, right?
Yeah.
So
you have a comment from Luis Camilo Alves. He's saying, hi Michael, in Portugal you can buy lead white. Check the brand Dar Decor. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Getting a few statues.
I know. I gotta pick a few batches when I get there.
And then 2 more. So Maribel Galvão, she says, I feel you have really the immigrant experience. I'm a Luso-Canadian, and as I look at your paintings, I feel I'm looking into my own experience, the gatherings around the table and the making chorizo, etc. Thank you for doing what you do. How has your work been received by the Portuguese community?
You know what, to be honest, I find that the Portuguese community, in my opinion, have been the most supportive in my career. You know, and in some cases you would think otherwise, but for the most part, I think most of my success comes from the Portuguese community, right? And whether it's linking me or connecting me to certain people. But it's great. You know, I really appreciate that because, you know, you want to be part of a culture that really, you know, that helps further people in whatever career they're trying to pursue, you know? And so, I don't know, it just always seemed to work out for me, you know? Yeah.
So the last question, Maria Amélia Ramachotti, she's asking you, do you have a market in Brazil?
I mean, I've shown work in Brazil. I don't have a dealer or any gallery that I show it there. I would like to. I've shown in some, you know, some shows there and things like that. But I don't have a gallery there. No.
Yeah, but you showed at the Afro Museum, right?
Yeah, so that was a show that Zé Mario, the owner of Galeria Graça Brandão, put together there. And he had someone curate it. He was met up with the curator, and he put that show together. And so those 2 paintings, the far one went there, and the one of the lady at the table went there as well. So
yeah. So we are about time. It's 8 o'clock now, and I would like to thank you all for joining this session this evening. I want to thank especially Michael for being here and open your studio to us and showing everything.
Mm-hmm.
And to Isabel, that has been a great co-host here. And yes, and I would like to thank you all for being here. And the next Meet the Artist is on April 20th, and it will be Jeff Lloyd Dever. And I would also like to ask you to visit our gallery. So it's www.portugueseamericanartgallery.com, And I hope to see you all soon.
Yeah, Michael, thank you so much.
No, and thank you.
Really,
I want to say thank you, Isabel, and thank you, Sandra, and you know, thank you for just having me be a part of this. I really appreciate it, and both of you are great today. So thank you.
well, you were fantastic.
Thank you,
Thank
Michael.
you. Very inspiring. And let's say your website so people can go and check your work.
Sure.
For the audience.
So you could see my work at Michael DeBrito on Instagram, or you can see it at michaeldebrito.com as well. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for everyone for coming out.
See you soon.
Yeah, definitely. See you soon.
See you soon.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.